Chairman Cantwell, excellent point, and we will follow up on it, and very much appreciate your leadership on this issue as you were involved in the used car recall issue as well. Thank you so much. And I want to just take the point that Senator Cantwell made so well. I have introduced S 1355, which is the Sunshine and Product Safety Act, that strikes a section of the current law, Section 6B, the section that restricts the disclosure of information. It actually restricts the disclosure of information by the CPSC related to product hazards. It permits a manufacturer to challenge the disclosure of information in federal court if the manufacturer believes the disclosure is not, quote, fair in the circumstances, which is an extraordinarily vague standard. Changes to 6B would improve recall efficiency and give the CPSC more of the teeth that it needs to be a real tiger, not a paper watchdog. Ms. Rhodes, can you comment on that potential change in the Sunshine in Product Safety Act?
Absolutely. We see with recalls that once the recall is disclosed, consumers can learn about it, but there's this whole hidden process with recalling companies in CPSC where they can be discussing an unsafe product for weeks or even months before consumers are even informed. The removal of 6B will allow consumers to get information immediately, which is especially important when we're talking about products that can seriously injure and also kill people.
Dr. Hoffman, would you favor that kind of change in the law that would permit greater disclosure and more promptly about hazards in toys?
Absolutely. And I think for many juvenile products, that's an issue. We saw that very specifically in the issue of incline sleepers, when on April 5th of 2019, it was disclosed by the Consumer Product Safety Commission that there were 10 deaths associated with those products. And a report by Consumer Reports that came out 3 days later revealed there actually were 32. The fact that products can be identified as hazardous without and they're with a lack of any requirement to notify the public around the specific product, I think leads to significant increased risk of injury and death for kids.
Thank you. Ms. Lawrence? Ms. Lawrence, will you support that change in Section 6B of the Act?
Well, prefacing my response by the fact that I am not a lawyer, I do understand that 6B is in place in part because early information in the investigation and decisions regarding a recall is often inaccurate, and thus, if information was released prematurely, it could be misleading to consumers and unfair to the company. But I'm happy to provide a response from the Toy Association on this issue, should you be interested in that following the hearing.
I'm not only interested, but I would request that you provide that response. I hope that the Toy Industry Association will support it because it would simply remove time-consuming and costly roadblocks to disclosure of information to consumers. It permits, in effect, manufacturers to block and conceal very severe hazards in toys for lengthy periods of time. And I'm hopeful that the Toy Industry Association will support the Sunshine in Product Safety Act that would remove this kind of impediment. So I will welcome and ask you to provide that information. In this first round of questioning, let me turn to you, Ms. Rose, because you brought with you the Wild Republic slap wrist toy, or it's actually an accessory. It's a watch, as I understand it. And you held it up briefly. Could you hold it up again, please?
Yes, absolutely.
I know it's still in the package, but I gather that watch has a lithium battery that can pop out. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is tucked behind here if you could see the back of the watch.
And a child who has that watch could easily pop out the battery.
Yes, that's why it was recalled.
The battery would look something like this. And the battery, in effect, has an acid that eats through the lining of the trachea or esophagus in a child who swallows it. It's, I guess, the acid that does the damage, but this kind of small button cell battery is found in a wide variety of items. Could you list a few of them that are commonly found in households?
Yes, they can be found in TV remotes, garage doors. Sometimes we'll have, that clicker will have button cell, coin cell batteries. We do find them in children's toys, of course. So objects that are just around the house that you may not think of, especially when it comes to TV remotes that may just be placed on the table.
They're powerful batteries. They're useful. They perform an important function. But if they're unsafely secured in those common household items, they can be swallowed by children, correct?
Correct.
Dr. Hoffman, could you tell us what happens to the esophagus of a child who swallows one of these batteries if it's lodged in the throat?
Absolutely. So those batteries function, there's a positive side and a negative side. So the top is one and the bottom is the other. If there is contact between the two, and there's contact on the positive side and the negative side at the same time, it starts to discharge electricity. The acid is in the battery, and that's what leads to the electric charge. In the esophagus, which is the food tube of a child, the top part of the battery and the bottom part of the battery will be contacted by the tissue. And that contact with the tissue will allow electricity to begin flowing. And so it's not actually a chemical burn, but it's an electrical burn that happens. And it happens immediately at the first contact between the child's tissue and the top and bottom of the battery. So the damage is instantaneous, and the degree of damage is a function then of the strength of the battery and the duration of time that it is in contact with human tissue. So we can see injury within an hour or less, and as Ms. Hamsmith's experience tragically showed, within a couple of hours, that damage can be irreversible and potentially fatal.
Dr. Hoffman, does the damage continue potentially after the battery is removed?
In the same way that any burn continues to cause tissue damage after the source of the burn, the heat source, is removed, yes, and especially with electrical burns, that's true.
Is the burn treatable? It would seem like the throat is a difficult part of the body to reach if there is a burn in the esophagus.
Absolutely. While the gastrointestinal tract, the digestive tract has a significant blood supply, it does tend to heal fairly well. But these burns are severe enough that they can cause lifelong damage, and if they're deep enough and cause, as tragically happened in Reese's case, perforation or rupture, it can lead to even longer term issues, as the experience with the Hamsmiths shows.
There's no requirement now, Dr. Hoffman, as I understand it, that hospitals specifically report these kinds of injuries, correct?
Not as far as I'm aware, no.
So the number that we have, which itself is absolutely appalling and horrifying, could well be only a fraction of the total number. In fact, it's been estimated that it's only 11%, that 350,000 number.
Absolutely.
And let me ask you, I know that this is more an educated guess on your part than actual documented scientific data, but what could explain the uptick in ingestions in 2020, an increase of 93% between March and September of that year?
Yeah, I think, Senator, you alluded to this in your opening remarks. I think a lot of it has to do with just exposure. A child who lives in an environment where there are no button or coin batteries is going to have a 0% chance of accessing one and potentially ingesting it. The period of time we're talking about, we were still looking at kids who were home during the day. Parents were out of their broken away from their routine and caught and forced to be teachers and workers and babysitters. And while we know that parental supervision and the supervision of caregivers is absolutely essential to help prevent injuries for children, it's completely it's completely insufficient. And having kids around products with button and coin batteries for longer periods of time with that potentially distracted supervision, I think, goes a long way towards explaining this tragic increase.
Right. And some battery manufacturers actually have developed a coating with a very bitter taste, a bitter coating for the batteries to help signal to kids or others that they should spit it out. Should we still push for some kind of mandatory product safety standard that will secure the batteries within whatever the items are?
Absolutely, Senator. I think so much of what we try to do in injury prevention is install layers of protection. I think the bittering agent, there's no data yet to support that. I think there's some promise in it, but we don't have any hard data to show that it is at all effective. And I think, short of eliminating these from an environment, doing everything we can to put barriers to access in place, which would include making it as hard as possible for a battery to be removed inadvertently from a product by a child who's not supposed to have access to it, would be a huge step forward.
And I know that the American Academy of Pediatrics has done a lot to educate parents. Would you say that parents are generally unaware or aware of the dangers of these batteries?
I think it's tremendously variable. Clearly Academy policy and everything we have that is designed for families, including our healthychildren.org resources, talk about this, but there's so much, there's so many hazards around, and these batteries are so ubiquitous. I think it is a little bit challenging to get people's attention, and certainly to get people's attention to the degree that I think the problem warrants.
Thank you. I have a number of additional questions, but I am going to turn to the ranking members and then come back whenever she finishes.
Thank